Good job. This week is Parshas Kisisa, and the main story in this parsha is the story of the Egel Hazav, of the Jews worshiping the golden calf. Anyone reading this would think this would be the most terrible sin. Moshe just went up to Mount Sinai, received the 10 Commandments. The Jews standing at the bottom of the mountain heard thunder, saw lightning, were tremendously fearful. They felt and heard the presence of God himself, telling them, Anochi Hashem Elokech, I am the Lord your God who took you out of the land of Egypt. Lo yeh elecha elehim acherim al panai, you should not have any other gods in front of me. And Moshe is a little late coming back downstairs, and immediately they're worshiping a golden calf. You would think that they would get ultimate and immediate destruction, which is exactly what God actually threatens the Jewish people through Moshe. He says, Achala osam karega, I will destroy them in just a moment. Ve'escha asoi l'goy gadol, I will make you, Moshe, into a great nation. So we know Moshe pleads with God. He uses the 13 attributes of God, and God says, okay, they're forgiven. A few thousand people die. It's not a pleasant experience at all. And God says they'll be punished for generations after. Whenever we punish the Jews for other sins, or whenever someone does a sin, they'll also be punished for the golden calf. That will be included. But they're not held back from going to the land of Israel, and they're not completely destroyed. When we come to the sin of the spies, they have to wait 40 years to go into the land of Israel. So there's many different answers that could be given between these two different sins. But simply, it's completely out of proportion that we allow this terrible sin immediately after the revelation of Mount Sinai to go unpunished, or mostly unpunished, I should say. And what's interesting is the Medrash makes a link between the sin of eating from the Eitz Hadas, eating from the tree of knowledge, and the golden calf. In what way? There's no direct literary connection between the two, except that the beginning of the book of Bereshis, we have the creation of Adam and Eve, and the first thing they do is sin. Here we have the creation of a Jewish nation, and the first thing they do is sin. So these sins are somewhat parallel. The Medrash says that there's like a zuhama, a pollution that enters into Adam and Eve, and therefore they are no longer this, these ideal spiritual beings that they were in the beginning, and because of that, they're punished forever. Mankind is punished forever with the punishments that are noted in the beginning stories of Bereshis. And I should just make a note there also. God said, if you eat from it, most tamus, you shall surely die. And they don't surely die. Adam at least lives to 950 years, which is a long time by any account. And it just means what it means, that maybe eventually you'll die instead of living forever, or you'll be aware of death. There's many different explanations. But again, a great punishment is stated, and it's not carried out. Here, a great punishment is stated, it's not carried out. And the Medrash goes on to say that that's zuhama, the pollution that entered mankind with the eating from the tree of knowledge, is removed when the Torah is revealed to the Jews at Mount Sinai. That experience brings them back to that ideal state that they were when they were in the Garden of Eden. And when they sinned with the golden calf, the zuhama, this pollution, re-enters them, and they become again on a lower status, just like before. And what I would like to suggest is that sin is natural. Sin is understandable. Failings are just what human beings do. Nobody is perfect, and we're not expected to reach that ideal state. But we're striving for a certain point. So the story of Bereshit starts off with man in the Garden of Eden, pure innocence. And what does he do? He eats from the Eitz Hadas, the tree of knowledge. So I would say that's somewhat intellectual, a sin which is guided by the intellect. He's searching for knowledge. It's man, as I've stated other times, it's man becoming man. And when man becomes man, he starts to search. He finds some answers to be truthful, some answers to be false. We go down false paths, but hopefully eventually we come to the correct opinion. But it's a dangerous path. Innocent children or animals which perhaps don't have that intellectual apprehension that man has as he develops throughout human history, they might be better off. They're just pure, they're innocent, they do what they do by instinct. There's no right or wrong, there's no tov or ra, good and bad, there's no sinning, there's no performance of mitzvahs. Just live your life as it is. We have the challenge of now trying to understand what life is all about. And we move through the story of Bereshit till we get to Avraham, which in a sense accepts God and accepts the monotheistic belief that Judaism is founded on, until it develops to the Jews leave Egypt and accept the Torah. And now you'd think, okay, we're at our perfect state. We've gone through the intellectual trajectory that we were intended to, and now we have this perfect state. And then you think, oh, now they sinned the golden calf, that's all down the tubes. But perhaps if you look at the story, you understand it perhaps in a different light. You might think of it not so much as they're throwing out the idea of monotheism, of belief in God, but it's their need to have something material, something to attach themselves to, something to grab onto, something concrete, something that they could worship. Moshe, going up to Mount Sinai, is teaching this pure idealism, these theoretical truths. And if you look at the life of Moshe, you don't see Moshe as being, as I say other times, he's not like Avram, who's Avram Avinu, Avram our father. Moshe is Moshe Rabbeinu, Moshe our teacher. There's not a focus on his family life. There's not a focus on his emotions, although he does get angry in this story. But there's no real focus on his life as a human being. He's more of a leader. He's more of a teacher. He's more of an idealist. He's more of a theoretician. He lives in the world of theory. He's a theologian. But that's not what most people are about. And therefore, when God says, I will destroy the nation and make you a great nation, destroy the people, make you a great nation, Moshe says no. And perhaps God didn't really intend it. He's saying the ideal would be to have a people, a nation full of Moshes, full of intellects, full of people who understand the nature of God, who God is, what his name is, as he asked in the beginning when he first sees God, God is first revealed to him. None of that is realistic in practical terms. It's the ideal. Moshe says, no, that can't be. I'm not going to go down that path. I am not. He doesn't say that in those words, but perhaps what's intended is Moshe is not the person to be a nation. He's there to be a leader of the nation. The other people, what do they have to do? They need something to dance and to sing. And it says, Vayakumu l'tzachik, they got up and they had laughter, they had fun. When Jethro comes, it says that he sat down with a meal with Aaron and others. It doesn't say he sat down with a meal with Moshe. Their form of celebration is not how Moshe celebrated. Moshe might have celebrated by going into the Beis Medrash, going to the study hall and studying. Other people want a meal. It's almost the difference between sort of the Hasidic way of life and the non-Hasidic way of life. There's an emphasis in Hasidus of dancing, of singing, of joy. And when you have that emotional side, of course, you also want to attach yourself to those physical things. So Moshe's up in the sky, he's up in the heavens, he's up on the mountain. It's hard to relate to. So when he's not coming down, he says, we'd rather have something we could put our hands on, something we could really worship, something we could, and it says they got up and they danced. And Moshe gets upset with that because that whole emotional approach leads you down a path towards idolatry, which it does. Again, there are commentaries who defend the Jews and say, no, they weren't really being idolatrous, they were just looking for another leader. But a simple reading is they were worshiping idols. But the reason wasn't because they denied God as much as the human need for emotional satisfaction. So therefore, the parallel between the stories of the beginning of Bereshit and the beginning of Shmos is very simple. First, we strive for intellect, apprehension, understanding God, developing our minds. After that is done, then we have to worry about our emotions. And our emotions are the driven by actions, by feelings, by dancing, by singing, by ritual, which is the Torah is full of. The Torah is full of mitzvahs because we need something for our life to revolve around. We can't just sit on the mountain and think about God. We have to act it out. The danger of acting out, of course, is that you go towards idolatry. The job of the Jewish people is to make sure that they end up devoting their life and channeling those emotions towards the correct opinions, to worship of God, and not to the false gods, not to the false gods of gold and silver. But we're allowed to have gold and silver. We're allowed to eat and drink. We're allowed to dance. And so therefore, this sin is a natural sin. It's something just like the tree of knowledge was going to happen, and it almost should happen. Here also, not that we want this to happen, but it's a natural occurrence. You start off with the ideal, you sort of realize that you can't keep that ideal, then you have to work towards it. So God, although he threatens to destroy him, no, there's a recognition that that's not what a nation is going to be. That's not how nations are built. And the message to us is quite obvious. We all have these challenges. We have the intellectual challenge of our belief, of our ideas, and even the foundation of our morals and ethics. But ultimately, we also have the challenge of dealing with our emotional needs, our desires, our passions. We have to make sure we direct them in the correct path. Good Shabbos.